Apparently, the only makor that we have in halakha is Chanukah geld, money. The concept of giving gifts on Chanukah seems to be borrowed directly from what the goyim do. So he asked me a shaila. I felt really that I didn't want to be a mean parent. Am I allowed to give Chanukah gifts to my children? Am I not emulating chukos hagoyim? I told him it was mutter because shaveh kesef kekesef. Since you can give money, you can give them a train instead of the money, because we normally say that's equivalent. But this was the dilemma, because people thought Chanukah, Christmas, is it the same? Is it not the same? So here, the point I want to make is that Chanukah is an extraordinarily important holiday. Granted, it's not a Yom Tov. Granted, it doesn't have all of the halachas of a Yom Tov. But the message of Chanukah is so significant, and it's so deep. And it's deep both in a religious, halachic, historical sense, and it's deep in terms of the work that you do. In other words, in terms of mental health, of coming out of the darkness, of creating light where there was darkness. And therefore, like everything in Torah, there are so many multiple levels in which we understand something. So I'm going to try to connect it maybe to the issues that you face in your practice. First, in last week's Parsha, we read about Yaakov encountering Esav, and after Yaakov was gone for so many years, more than 20 years, he finally comes back to Eretz Yisrael, and he discovers that Esav's hatred has not gone away, and that Esav is going to try to kill him, apparently. And Yaakov prays, and he prepares for war, and he sends gifts. And Baruch Hashem, it turned out well, at least temporarily so. But the night before he meets Esav of the flesh, he must encounter Esav of the spirit. And what happened was that he had already transported his family, and then he went back. He recrossed the river, Yabok, in order to retrieve small little jars that he felt he could not forget about. And all of a sudden he's accosted by a mysterious man that wrestles with him the entire night. And the Torah does not really describe what this man is, who this man is, but Chazal tell us this is actually the guardian angel of Esav, that somehow Yaakov has to wrestle the spiritual force of Esav before he's able to meet the physical Esav of the flesh. And Yaakov wrestles all night, and sometimes he's winning, and sometimes the other person is winning, the other entity is winning. And then comes the crack of dawn. Yaakov is now on the ascendant. And the angel says, "Let me go, because the dawn has broke." And Yaakov says, "I will not send you until you give me a blessing." And the angel gives him a blessing. Your name is no longer Yaakov, your name is Israel, a language of triumph, and the like. Now obviously, a story like this is, even on the stage, a very deep story, a very mystical story. I just want to share a few thoughts about this story. First of all, there's a machlokas in the Gemara. What did this angel look like? According to one opinion, the angel looked like an axe murderer, looked like a villain, looked like a criminal, looked like a real bad person. According to another opinion, he looked like a Talmid Chacham. He looked like a rabbi with a long white beard. He looked saintly. Now, it's hard for us to understand in what way would the angel of Esav appear to be saintly, appear to be righteous. And one of the interpretations that's offered is that this is not really a machlokas. Rather, the angel had two different guises. The guise of evil, the guise of good. And this actually represents the fact that Yaakov himself is wrestling with two different forces. Because the truth of the matter is, Yaakov and Esav are twins. And although Yaakov became the righteous one, and Esav became the evil one, within Esav there is something of Yaakov. And within Yaakov there is also something of Esav. And Yaakov himself is undergoing a struggle of cheshbon hanefesh. In the middle of the night, all alone, where there's no family to support him. And Yaakov is struggling. Am I worthy of God's divine blessing? Perhaps I have also behaved like the Esav in me. I have gotten the brachos through deception. I bought the birthright by taking advantage of a starving brother. Am I in a better position than my brother to deserve divine blessing? So when the Gemara says he's struggling with the angels, in quite a literal sense, as we say in English. He is struggling in part with the inner demons within himself. There's the Talmud Chacham, there's the righteous, saintly part, which of course he does not deny because that is him. But there's also the aspect of the Esav within. And he's going through a struggle because this is what an honest person does. This is what a righteous person does. A righteous person confronts even the dark corners of their being, because that is the process of cheshbon hanefesh. That is the process of honesty, of confronting even those dark corners of yourself, because that liberates you ultimately, and that frees you up. And thus, the idea of the Talmud Chacham and the axe murderer are not two different people. They are reflective of a duality that Yaakov feels within himself. And precisely because of the honesty of that cheshbon hanefesh, he achieves victory. And God says, your name will no longer be the heel, that which is on the dirt, but precisely because of your struggle, sarisa, you have excelled, you have triumphed, you have achieved victory. Because when we're honest with ourselves, we don't try to fool ourselves. We confront the totality of our being. We become liberated, we become free. We're able to connect to God. Again, it's a bit of a startling insight that the angel he's wrestling with is in fact himself. That would be the mirror image, so to speak. Now in this sense, I just saw something over Shabbos from Rabbi Sachs. Very, very, very nice article. Again, a little bit of iconoclastic thoughts. He explained the idea of Yaakov and Yisrael. Yaakov, of course, is a name that connotes heels. And Yisrael is a name that connotes triumph. His take on it was this. He says, heel is the idea that you're trying to imitate somebody else. Until this point, Yaakov, in a sense, was trying to be Esav. He took Esav's Bechorah. He took Esav's Bracha. He was always in the heels of being somebody else. Hashem is telling him, or the Malach is telling him, it's time to be your person. It's time to be who you are. No longer shall you be in the heels of someone else, but you yourself shall be a person who triumphs. Now that is, again, this is not the way most Meforshim understand it. I certainly acknowledge it. But the thought itself is very, very important. You know, we live in a world, and maybe even more so in the religious world, and it's true in all parts of human endeavor. But we live in a world where there's a great premium placed on conformity.
What?
Conformity.
Oh, yeah.
Imitation. Trying to fit the mold. Now, of course, one cannot deny that to be a religious Jew, there is, of course, a great proportion of our life that has to be in conformity with norms. There is a Torah, there is mitzvos, there is a halachic structure. Hashem does not allow us, so to speak, to go totally at our own beat. But we actually go beyond that. Sometimes there's such conformity that people are afraid to express their ideas, their creativity, that which nurtures their soul. They suppress it. This is why, again, I'm not using it in a clinical sense, but at least maybe on a subclinical level, there's a great deal of depression in the yeshiva world, in the Torah world, because people are cutting themselves off from their creativity. They're cutting themselves off from their energy. They're cutting themselves off from things that give them joy, because there's a preconceived notion that to be a religious Jew, you have to be a certain type of person. You have to dress a certain way. You have to be a certain way. When in fact, within the parameters of halacha, there is a great importance that's also expressed on creativity and individuality. Rav Yitzchak is trying to create it. The idea of Yaakov is to follow somebody else's model. Yisrael is to become yourself, to discover yourself, to open up yourself. That is actually why tribes are such a big deal. You know, we don't have a strong sense of tribal identification today. I mean, except for Kohanim and Levim, we don't even know our Shevet. Yehuda, Benyamin, Yisachar, you could be any Shevet at all. But clearly in the Torah and in the time of the first Beis HaMikdash, tribal affiliation was very important. You had your own portion of land, your own nasi, etc. In Midbar, you had a distinct place where you camped. And one wonders, why are tribes so important anyway? Why does the Torah even introduce the notion of tribalism? Isn't the only thing that's important is I'm a Jew? Why is it important? I'm a Reuben, I'm a Shimon, I'm a Yisachar. Is it necessary to introduce yet another disunity factor in Klal Yisrael? But the idea of tribes is actually very significant. Because Klal Yisrael as a whole were given a mission. But each tribe expressed the mission through an individual way. And therefore the message of the Shvatim is that community does not mean conformity. And individuality can flourish, even within a community. And really it goes the other way around. The Medrash tells us that the beauty of a garden for most people is when it contains different flowers, and not simply one red rose a million times. And as a result, the lesson of the Shvatim is that common purpose and common commitment still leaves room for diversity, individuality, creativity, and lahepach. The beauty of a community lies in the diverse types of expression that can exist. And therefore, I think, as I say, I know myself, that when someone comes to our Samer or yeshiva, they become a choser b'tshuva. So often there is a subtle, sometimes internally generated pressure, and sometimes externally, to give up certain interests that, poetry, music, whatever it might be, because it's not what a Ben Tola does, it's not what a seminary girl does. Now, granted, obviously, some things have to be given up. If somebody was a stripper or dancer or whatever, so we have to make some adjustment in how one lives that life. But still, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us talents and abilities, He does not want to squelch them. It would be perverse, I think, to say, oh, God gave you that talent to test you, so you will not use it, and you will destroy it. And that is how you serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Usually that's not the way it works. Usually if one is given a certain talent and ability and interest, Hashem wants you to find a way to use it in a good and productive way. So that's kind of the first part of the idea of Yaakov struggling with the angel. Now, of course, in a more general sense, the Sefer HaChinuch says a very beautiful idea, that whatever, we know of course, whatever happens to the Avos happens to us. And the long night is symbolic of Golus. And Hashem is telling us, the Jewish people will go through a long night. And in that long night, there will be enemies that will try to destroy us. And sometimes we'll be okay, and sometimes we'll be losing. But after that long night, God promises there will be a dawn, there will be a day, there will be a geula. And when that geula comes at the crack of dawn, we're not going to be unscathed, we're going to be limping. The Jewish people have suffered tremendously through the thousands of years of Golus. We're going to be limping. We're going to have our losses. But even the nations that try to destroy us will acknowledge our holiness and our goodness and will give us the bracha. So the Sefer Chinuch says this is a beautiful encapsulation of the history of the Jewish people. The night, the long, dark night, where there's so much hopelessness and so much despair. But there will be a dawn. But again, just as whatever happens to the Avos happens to the Jewish nation, it also has a message for an individual as well. People struggle with darkness, and sometimes it seems so hopeless. But they have to remember that if they're a Jew, part of God's promise to Yaakov is after the night, there will be a light. And yes, things aren't going to seem exactly as perfect as you wanted them to be. You're going to be limping. There's going to be a cost. But you'll come out of it. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. Fundamentally, the Jewish attitude towards life is one of optimism, but it's not a Pollyannish optimism. It's a bit more sophisticated. It's not the optimism that, like Christians sometimes say, the ministers, if you just pray hard enough, God will give you a Cadillac. It doesn't work that way. We pray, we don't become rich overnight, so to speak. Maybe we don't become rich. Okay, I don't want to take that away. But it's a different type of optimism. It's the optimism that whatever life it is that Hashem gives, I'm going to see the light in it. I'm going to see the good. I did it just yesterday. I did somebody was doing something on Perek Shira, all the different animals and things. So they wanted people to record 4 minute talks on each thing. So I happened to do ducks yesterday. I did a 4-minute talk on a duck. And actually it was quite interesting. I really didn't know anything about ducks, and I didn't know the connection, but I want to tell you the thought that I discovered. What does the duck say? Right? Every animal has a pasuk, has a song. So the song of the duck is the pasuk that we say in Uval Tziyah from Yeshayahu. Bitchu b'Hashem adayad. Have bitachon in Hashem forever. Ki b'ka Hashem tzur olamim. Because in God is the creator of the worlds. So the duck is connected to bitachon. So the question obviously is, what do ducks have to do with bitachon, right? So here's the thing. Bitachon, how is bitachon different than emunah? Emunah is intellectual. I know that God runs the world. I know that God loves me. I know that God takes care of me. I know it. But in my heart, I still don't feel it. I'm consumed with worry, anxiety, loss of control. Bitachon is really the emotional internalization of emunah. Bitachon is serenity, security, trust. Bitachon is applied emunah. Now, one of the aspects of bitachon is the notion of resilience and understanding that life isn't always what you plan. And you have to roll with the punches, and you have to be flexible, and you have to be adaptable, and see the good in what Hashem has given you, even if it's not what you expect. So hence we have the duck. The duck is a surprisingly versatile creature, because ducks live in 3 different environments. Ducks function very well in water, they function very well on land, they can walk around on land and eat, and then they can fly. So wherever a duck finds itself, it's able to take advantage of the situation. It's not limited, and it gets food in all 3 places. And therefore it represents versatility, flexibility, adaptability. That's bitachon. Bitachon is not, God will give me what I want. It's the other way around. Bitachon says, I see in what I have that this is good. Sameach b'chelko, I appreciate that Hashem will give me the ability to take the good from whatever situation that I'm in. This, I think, again, how you translate it in therapy, I'll obviously leave to you. But in terms of an overall attitude to life, to see the positive, to see the potential, to see that, as the alcoholic's prayer goes, what you can change, don't change, but what you can't change, accept and embrace and see it as a source of strength and a source of goodness. That is really what bitachon comes for. And that is the message that, in life there are struggles, and in life there are darkness. And you get hurt. You're going to be limping sometimes. But there's going to be a day, and there's going to be a dawn. And one always has to keep in mind that that is the case. And that's where, memory is so helpful to us, because we've had low points, and we've gotten out of it. And then when a person gets in a low point again, they think, they'll never get out of it. And they have to remember, you've been here before. You've been here before. Just hold on. You'll get out of it like you got out of it. And you can be, not that you will be, it's not always a promise, unfortunately, because we don't always live up to what we're able to do. But you can be stronger. You can be greater. You can learn from this. Nietzsche, not an Ohev Yisrael, but a famous quote, that which does not destroy me will only make me stronger. And that's this important lesson. But then we go on, I'm just going on in the narrative again, and Yaakov then doesn't want to release the angel till he asks the angel, what is your name? And the angel says, Lama za tishal lishmi. Why are you asking my name? Don't bother me. By the way, I once heard from an old European Rav, very cute, it's really a humorous joke, but it's very telling. He says, the angel wrestles with Yaakov all night. The angel is in no rush to go home to Shemayim, right? The angel will beat up Yaakov all night. As soon as Yaakov asks him for a blessing, he says, "Gotta go. I'm in a rush." He says, "That's the derech. That's the derech of the rush. When it comes to pain and infliction, no rush at all. I got all night. When it comes to bracha, sorry, don't have time. But anyway,
So that's a Jewish joke.
Yeah.
That makes it all your Jewish joke. That's right.
Yeah, but what does the angel mean when he says, "Why are you asking my name?" So Rashi says the pshat is that the angel's name depends on his mission. Meaning, I get a different name every time. Every time I have a different mission, I have a different name. So I don't have a fixed name. But Rav Shradran brings, the famous Maggid brings, in the name of his Rebbe, Rav Yehuda Leib Chasman, great Baal Musar, that this is actually the angel's name. The angel's name is, "Why are you asking my name?" That is my name.
Who's on first?
That's right, you got it. Those of you who remember Abbott and Costello, this is exactly who's on first. Right? The first baseman's name is who? Who's on first? That's what I'm asking you, right?
Okay.
So what type of name is it? Don't ask my name. So Rav Chasman gives a beautiful, beautiful mashal. He says, and it's surprising that he uses a mashal involving a movie, but this is the mashal that he used. He says there was a Polish peasant who was not very well educated, not educated at all, and he was going to the big city for the first time, and he was told that if he buys a ticket, and there's a movie ticket, and he sits in the theater, he will see people and animals coming out of the wall. They'll materialize like magic, which is a movie.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't know this. He didn't know what it meant. He buys the ticket. He's sitting in the dark. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, people, animals materialize. He thinks they're real. And he can't believe it because when he went into the room, there seemed to be no hidden doors. How did they get in? Didn't understand it. So he took his big, powerful flashlight and he shone it on the wall to kind of see if there's some hidden entrance. And when you shine a bright light on a movie, then you don't see it anymore. So people were screaming at him, and they said, "Shut your light. We can only see the movie when it is dark." Rav Chasman said, "This is a mashal for Olam Hazeh. When you sit in the darkness, meaning you don't think about life, you just go through the motions. You don't prioritize. You don't ask yourself what is important. You don't ask why I'm here. Then all sorts of things that aren't real look like they're real, whether it's money, whether it's power, whether it's status, whether it's the grudges that we have against people, the resentments. And that becomes so real to us, and that takes over our life because we're really sitting in the dark. And the other thing about darkness is that darkness makes you see things as real, which are not real, but it also prevents you from seeing things that are real. There might be a box of diamonds in the seat next to you. You're not even going to notice it. When you turn on the lights, two things happen. That which is not real disappears, and that which is real you can now perceive. Now it's very interesting that, according to our tradition, the Jewish people will go through 4 exiles until the building of the Beis HaMikdash. The first is the Golus of Babylon, which destroyed the Mikdash, and then Persia, and then the Greek period, where the Chanukah story took place, and then the Romans destroyed the second temple called Golus Edom, and even though there are no Romans around, but we're still in Golus Edom. And again, there's another medrash that combines it with Yishmael, Arabs to create a 5th Golus. That's an interesting discussion. But in the traditional typology, we are in Golus Edom. The song Maoz Sur, right, that you undoubtedly know, is not about Chanukah. There's only one stanza about Chanukah, but each stanza is about one of those Goluses, starting with Mitzrayim, which is pre-Golus, because we didn't get there. So there's Mitzrayim, and then there's Babylon, and then there's Persia. Then there's one on Chanukah, Yevanim Nikutzu Alai, and then you have the asking Hashem that we should be redeemed from the Roman Golus as well. That last stanza, by the Chasos Roy Kachecha, was very, very heavily censored, because the Catholic Church saw it as an attack on them, and that is why, if 2 people are singing Maoz Sur from 2 different Sidurim, they may have different wording there. That's a very heavily censored and reworded stanza for various reasons. The author of Moasur, as you know, is a person otherwise anonymous called Mordechai, because each stanza, Mem, Reish, Dalet, Chav, Yod, and the last one is Chazak, Chasov, Saroa, Kachecha, is Chazak, Mordechai, may Hashem give him strength. So there are these 4 Golos. Now it's interesting that each Golos goes by a different name. Going back to the Pasuk, all the way back in Bereshit, Haaretz haisa sayu vavayu. The world, the universe was empty and confused, and choshech, and it was dark, al pnei tahom, on the face of the depths. So the Medrash says the Torah at the very beginning of creation is meramez to the 4 exiles. Tayu, emptiness, is Babylon that destroyed the Beis Hamikdash. Confusion is Shushan, Persia, that tried to destroy the whole nation, and the pasuk says, "Ir Shushan Nevocha." Even the Persian city was confused. Yavan is Choshech. I'll come back to that, darkness. And Rome, which is such a long galus that's lasted almost 2,000 years, is Pnei Tahom. It's the depths that never ends. But going back to Yavan in particular, Yavan is called the galus of Choshech. Why is Yavan called the galus of Choshech? Because on one level, Yavan is not a galus at all. We're living in Eretz Yisrael, and we have a Beis Hamikdash. But it's dark, because in the darkness, you don't see the gift that you have. And you're deceived by false realities. You have to know one thing historically. The process of Hellenization, where Jews were abandoning Torah and assimilating, was not only due to Antiochus' decree. Most of the Jewish people were doing it voluntarily, just like in the United States. They were simply abandoning it. Then when the Maccabees made their fight, not only were they fighting the Yavanim, most of the Jewish people thought they were fanatics. It is estimated no more than 10% of the Jewish people were faithful to Torah at the time of the Chanukah story. No more than that. So, as a result, Chazal accurately described the galus of Yavan, not so much as a galus of persecution, but as a galus of darkness, in which people simply didn't see the reality in front of them, and they were attracted by false realities. So now, let's go back to the story of Yaakov and the angel. Right? We have to answer the question, what does it mean? What type of name is it? Why are you asking my name? So here is what Rav Chasman says. When Yaakov asks the angel, tell me your name, a name represents the spiritual power of an entity. That's why the Arizal says that when parents name a child at a bris, and I assume it would hold true for a daughter, a child, whatever it is actually a prophecy from God that this is the nature and the power of the child. Now we're not sensitive enough to know exactly what that power is, but whether it's Esther, Sarah, Reuben, Shimon, Yaakov, Moshe, it's not simply after the bubby or the zaidi or the aunt or the uncle. Rather, it is connected primevally to that archetype that bore that name. And there's something in the child's neshama that has that spiritual power. So when Yaakov is asking, in fact, that's why we're very reluctant to change names. You could change a name when someone is very, very ill, but for Derech Klal, we don't like to fool around with names, because a name kind of identifies this person's spiritual energy. Ad Kedei Kach, that I was once at a bris, listen to this, I mean, you could argue about this, and the grandfather, the mother's father, was the Sandik. I'm sorry, not the Sandik, he was honored to name the baby. And he didn't like the name that his children had chosen. So when it was time to announce the name, he just gave another name. He just said the name he wanted. Maybe it was his father or something. And I remember, I didn't know what was going on, but I do remember hearing from the Ezra Snushim, no, so I remember hearing like the mother crying out. And the Rav there actually paskined, he was an eminent Rosh Yeshiva, he actually paskined
too bad.
If this was proclaimed at the bris, this is the child's name.
Wow.
Now, interestingly enough, this is quite amazing. I was at another bris the same week with the same Rav, and here is a little different. The one that name didn't hear it right, and he said the wrong name.
Yeah.
And the Rosh Hashiva there paskined, same Rosh Hashiva, that you can correct the mistake.
Wow.
Now, you could differentiate between an intentional change and a mistake, or perhaps after the mother gave him a yelling, he reconsidered his back the second time. I don't know exactly which version happened, but in in 1 week I had 2 stories of that. In one case he allowed the change, one case he didn't allow the change.
But I just wondered, because we were having this discussion earlier about sort of giving permission for an inappropriate thing to happen. In other words, like halachically, like b'tzad the Rosh Hashiva, like even though maybe that's the power of the kid, but by him saying it's okay that this person changed the name against the will of the parents.
Well, yeah, I understand. He clearly was not saying it's okay. But the concept is, if Hashem allowed it to happen, then Hashem is basically saying that this is what it is. That would be the idea.
It's
I
the
was
same
once
as
at a bris where the two netback was went to be Shnei Zalman, and the father said Zalman Shnei.
Oh, different order.
Yeah, and that was it. And they weren't allowed to change it. The Rav said no. That's
So
it.
not to change, really?
Yep.
Really.
And the mother went, okay.
I was like Solomon better anyway.
The father proclaimed it, but the mother had said what it was, and then he said it wrong at the bris, but they couldn't change it.
So that's the same thing. That's the same idea.
That's the idea that the name
same
was-
concept as Yaakov stealing the bracha, and Yitzchak saying your brother did it, and you know,
And you can't-
That's
that's
very
it?
similar. Once it's done,
It's done.
Like
there's a
if
certain
God,
finality.
if God
God allowed it to happen.
Yeah.
So Yaakov is asking, because so going back to this, so when Yaakov is asking the angel, now the angel represents a lot of things. The angel represents Esav, the angel represents evil, the angel represents Yetzer Hara, the angel represents all of those temptations in the world that take away from God. So when Yaakov is asking, what's your name? He's saying, what's your power? How do you trick people? Rationally, it makes no sense to do Averos and not do mitzvahs. What are you going to gain from
This
it?
is Asa.
Meaning to say, Yaakov is asking the angel, what's your secret? How do you trick people into accepting your power? And the angel's answer is, my trick is nobody bothers to ask. Nobody bothers to think. When they're in the dark, then anything can happen. That's lamaza, meaning, as if I say to the person, don't ask my name, don't think about it. And then things will go.
That's why they said that's his name.
Right, and that's
That's
the
his
thing.
name.
That's
Wow.
his name.
Wow.
My name is, don't think about me. And then I have you in my, I've trapped you.
Wait, Travis.
I've trapped you.
That's
So,
exactly
so
what it
we come to Chanukah, you know, and Chanukah has many, many sides to it. Chanukah was, of course, on one superficial level, a political victory for an independent Jewish state. But that's not why it was fought. It's very, very clear that although it turned into a war for political independence, that was not the reason. The reason clearly was to be able to establish the Torah and live by the Torah. That's what Nisim says, that the Yevanim were not anti-Semitic in the Hitlerian or the Haman sense. One could even say in a perverse way, Antiochus was a civil libertarian. Antiochus was willing to give Jews full political and social rights as long as they would go with the plan and not keep this distinctive religious observance. He was not going to exclude Jews from any type of endeavor, of business or profession. Huh?
Why was he?
Well, the reason was this was really a continuation of going back to Alexander the Great. Alexander of Macedonia wanted to homogenize his vast empire
Right.
with Hellenistic cultures. Now, he did it by persuasion and by assimilation. And actually, he was very successful. Most of the Jews went with the plan. Antiochus wanted to hurry it up a little bit by coercion. The goal was to kind of create a single cultural entity, which by definition would be politically easier to control. And one has to know, Antiochus was the first king in the ancient world who specifically targeted observances of the Torah. You know, we had plenty of bad people before him. We had Paro, we had Nebuchadnezzar, but none of them explicitly outlawed the practice of religion. Nebuchadnezzar didn't care if you wore tefillin and went to Daf Yomi, as long as you bowed down to him and whatever it would be. Antiochus was the first one that said, no Shabbos, no Rosh Chodesh, no Bris Milah. He is the first king of the ancient world who had specific anti-religious legislation upon pain of death. So obviously Chanukah therefore is the triumph of Torah, the light of the Torah over darkness. But there's another part of Chanukah that you need to think of as well, because the truth of the matter is there are many, many forms of darkness in the world. There is the darkness of violence, the darkness of hate. Just last week, Jews were killed in Jersey City. And even when the violence is not targeted against Jews, we live in a world of violence. We live in a world of death. Really, the death of anyone in a violent act is something that should give us pain. So we have that type of darkness. We have the darkness of ignorance. We have the darkness of assimilation. We have the darkness of so many Jews who are not connected to the Torah. And then we have the individual darkness that you confront so often. The darkness of despair, the darkness of loneliness, the darkness of being isolated, of not being connected, of not finding yourself, of not knowing how to make things work. Right? So there's darkness nationally and internationally, and within families, and between families, and within a person's own personality that can be fragmented and disjointed. And that darkness sometimes seems so overwhelming that one thinks there's no way I can deal with it. But the Lubavitcher Rebbe used to say that every Jew has to be kind of a lamplighter. Before there was electricity, they had the gas lamps, and there had to be somebody who either went on the ladder or had a big stick that would light the lamps. And what does a Jew do? A Jew is a person who lights lamps. Our job is to bring light into the world, light into everyone that we encounter, including ourselves. But sometimes the darkness is so overwhelming that we might think our light doesn't really make a difference. So consider for a moment the Chanukah story. They find a little jar of oil that can only burn for one day. Meaning the expectation is we're going to light it tonight, and by tomorrow morning it'll be gone. It's not going to last. So you might think, if you were a little pessimistic, what's the point of lighting it today? It's not going to be here tomorrow anyway. Why bother? And yet, what's the story of Hanukkah? You do what you can. Then Hashem blesses your efforts beyond what you thought was possible. I confront this enormous darkness, and I say to myself, my little light is inconsequential. It's insignificant. It's not going to do anything. Why even bother? But what's Hanukkah about? Do what you can, and then there'll be a great blessing beyond what you thought possible. Now, let me just conclude with a historical observation that I think makes this point even more powerful. We tend to think that when they found the oil and dedicated the Mikdash, that was the end of the war with the Yavanim, and a Jewish state was then proclaimed. In point of fact, the war continued another 25 years.
Yeah.
So the Chanukah story, as important as it was, is not the end of the struggle. It's the beginning of the struggle, or at least towards the beginning of the struggle. Now, the reason that's important is that makes the message of the menorah to the Maccabees an extraordinarily meaningful message. Because here the Maccabees are confronting the most powerful army of the world at the time. And this is before Rome had achieved its ascendancy. They are untrained. They are not that skilled in the art of warfare. They're actually conducting guerrilla war. In fact, someone told me that the United States suffered tremendously in Vietnam due to the inability of fighting guerrilla warfare against the Vietnamese peasants. So after the Vietnam debacle, they began studying the book of the Maccabees, because the Maccabees were essentially waging guerrilla warfare against a very well-trained army. So there's a lot of military strategy in the Chanukah story, so more than most of us are particularly interested in, but if you are a military historian type of person, you study the battle plans and everything else, and you get a lot of insight. So I understand that West Point reads the book of the Maccabees in great detail. Now, if you were a Maccabee, you might also say, What's the point of fighting this huge, powerful army when my own Jewish people are not supporting me? So Hashem gave them a message at the beginning of the struggle. It's much more powerful at the beginning of the struggle. Don't give up. Do what you can do. And then, as the Alanisa says, he has given the many into the hands of the few, the impure into the hands of the pure, the Rishayim in the hands of the Tzaddik. And that's kind of what life is about. You know, you look at the darkness and you say, what can I do about it? Logically, maybe nothing. But do what you can. And when you do what you can, you never know what result the Kadosh Baruch Hu is going to give you. Now, this I hope is a little bit of chizuk for you as well as for your patients, because I know that I know myself that confronting the emotional and mental health problems that people have is sometimes overwhelming. In fact, I'm surprised that more therapists don't need to go to therapists. I don't know.
We do.
Maybe you do.
That's why we have the beer over there on the table.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not driving home.
I remember, if I can give you a secular analogy, I remember when I was in college, so I read a book by a Jewish author, Nathaniel West, who committed suicide, Miss Lonely Hearts. And this was very fascinating. It really was fascinating. It's actually it's very powerful. I remember it after more than 30 years, in which this guy was given an assignment to take over like a Dear Abby column, where people would write, and he took it as such a joke. Initially it was so stupid, people write about this problem and that problem. And he took it like a joke. And then eventually, as he got more and more attuned to people's pain and suffering, he could not take it. It became so overwhelming to him. I think in the book, the character took his life, and actually the author, Daniel West, took his life in that way. And this is sometimes what you might call the therapist's dilemma, in which, there's so much darkness out there, there's so much pain out there. And, you can't snap your fingers as much as you'd like and simply have it go away. There's a process, and it's long, and it's hard. And it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and sometimes it's 1 step forward and 2 steps back, and sometimes it's just 3 steps back. But you got to keep on going.
As long as you keep holding your hand.
You got to keep on going. And don't give up. And I think Chanukah is symbolically that very, very powerful message. That the darkness might be so great, but do what you can, and then Hashem will take over. So we're all very, very happy. And pray for Chanukah, may it be full of light and full of hope. Amen.